Along with individual experts, Surgeon Masters brings you life improvement strategies in 10 minutes. These proven principles and strategies are easy to learn and can be applied immediately, allowing you to practice your best. Here's your host, Jeff Smith.
Welcome, everybody, to the Surgeon Masters mini podcast. I have with me today Dr. Joseph Kaczmarczyk. Welcome, Joe.
Jeff, thank you for having me on this episode and talking about crises.
Yeah, Joe, you and I have known each other for a little while now, and I know that you have a lot of background in leadership. And probably even before you got into that in your medical career, you probably dealt with crises. But I imagine in the leadership roles, you did that much more. So we're eager to hear a little bit about that topic.
Well, my involvement in crisis leadership is actually serendipitous. With two colleagues, I presented an Association of Professors of Gynecology and Obstetrics, or otherwise APGO, faculty development workshop on crises in medical education as a timely antecedent to the pandemic. Although crisis leadership and crisis management frequently are used interchangeably, there is an important distinction. Crisis leadership is knowing the right things to do, while crisis management is knowing how to do things right. Let me repeat that. It's so important that I want to repeat that. Crisis leadership is knowing the right things to do, while crisis management is knowing how to do things right. Shortly after that workshop, I became the interim dean of Peace Room, Georgia, and used the content of that workshop every day to lead during the pandemic.
So since every physician is a leader, let's explore the crisis leadership today. What comprises crisis leadership?
Jeff, there are 6 critical tasks of crisis leadership. First, sense making, which is understanding what is happening, what may happen, and what can be done about it. 2, decision making and coordinating, which refer to a series of what do we do now type of problems that are triggered by the flow of events. Third is meaning making, which is helping others to understand the meaning of what has happened and place it in a broader perspective or context. Fourth is accounting, which is finding the appropriate time and means to end the crisis. Fifth is learning, which is determining the lessons learned from the particular crisis. Sixth is preparing, which is ensuring preparedness for future challenges, both foreseen and unforeseen.
6 critical aspects. Let me ask you a very difficult question. What should a physician know about crisis leadership for a crisis you can't predict?
Jeff, that requires the ability to stop. Then it requires a cycle of moving from tasks to monitoring to diagnosis and back to task again, which I think most physicians should be able to embrace.
Tell me more.
After the crisis seems to be over, it's not over until an AAR or after action review is done. Please note that the R stands for review, not report. The AAR is based on 4 questions. 1, what was expected to happen? 2, what actually happened? 3, what went well and why? And 4, what can be improved and how?
I think it's helpful if you give us maybe some examples.
Rather than giving a predetermined example, I would rather give the listeners an opportunity to reflect on their own experiences and draw an example from that.
That makes sense.
So, recall a crisis, current or past. In that crisis, are you the crisis leader, crisis manager, or perhaps both? Did you perform any of the 6 critical crisis leadership tasks? If so, which one, or perhaps even which ones? Then ask yourself the 4 AAR questions, and I'll repeat them since you may not be able to recall them immediately. 1, what was expected to happen? 2, what actually occurred? 3, what went well and why? And 4, what can be improved and how? Pause for a moment and ask yourself the single most important question from this example in this brief exercise. What insight did you gain?
Those are interesting components. And certainly like the points we learn the most is in this sort of reflection exercise. So that's fantastic, Joe.
Thank you, Jeff.
And just a key point, I almost think it's that distinction. I mean, there's a lot of key points here, right? But I think it's that distinction between the leadership and the management. Tell us again that distinction.
If I could summarize everything we talked about, it's important to realize that crisis leadership is knowing the right things to do. Crisis management, on the other hand, is knowing how to do things right. The third point is the crisis isn't over until you ask the 4 AAR questions. And I should rephrase that and say, ask and answer the 4 AAR questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome, Jeff. My pleasure.
There you have it. In less than 10 minutes, this is Jeff Smith, along with Dr. Joe Kaczmarczyk. Until the next episode of Life Improvement Strategies for the Surgeon Who Wants More. Ciao.
Now, take 10 minutes and put your plan into action to practice your best.